We have allowed out-of-control politicians, tech giants, pandemic profiteers, operatives from the military-industrial complex, big pharma, medical malpractitioners, large multinational corporations such as Amazon and Walmart, and a cabal of global health and economic elites to ruthlessly exploit us under the guise of a global pandemic. It's hard to underestimate the influence of Dr. Joe Mercola. He is, by many measures, the biggest health guru out there. His website, Mercola.com, is claimed to have millions of page views a month. He is a best-selling author of many books. He built a company that has retained over 140 employees, and his messages about health, which often contradict medical and scientific consensus, have flooded social media. Even if you don't know who he is, someone close to you has probably consumed his content or his dietary supplements. I'm Jonathan Jarry. I'm a science communicator working at the Office for Science and Society at McGill University. Our goal is to separate sense from nonsense on scientific matters, and we often tackle things that look like science, but that actually are not based in fact. I use my own studies in biochemistry, molecular biology, and human genetics to figure out what is good science, what is bad science, and what is pseudoscience. A lot of people trust Joe Mercola to give them accurate information about which supplements to take, about which experts to trust, and about what the political elites are secretly working on. And that's unfortunate because there's a lot wrong with the work of Joe Mercola. From the newsletter that he sends out every day, to the pills that he sells, to the philosophy behind his projects, to the question of exactly who is writing all that content that is published under his name. So I thought, let's make a video. I want you to approach this with an open mind. What I'm presenting are facts. These facts come from legal proceedings, scientific papers, and his own employees. Also from a supernatural entity named Balon, but more on that later. Everything that I reference will appear in the upper right corner, and you can find the full reference in the notes below the video. Let's go down the rabbit hole to see what is hiding behind Joe Mercola's wellness empire. What follows is a summarized narrative of Joe Mercola's life, as reported on Mercola.com, his main website. Joseph Mercola was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. From 1972 to 1976, he studied at the University of Illinois at Chicago, majoring in biology and chemistry. And from 78 to 82, he attended the Chicago College of Osteopathic Medicine at Midwestern University. In the United States, osteopathic medicine is essentially an equivalent to actual medicine, although osteopaths tend to also take classes in manual therapy, with half of them saying that they don't actually use these interventions in their practice. Mercola worked as a pharmacy technician at both an eye bank and a kidney bank. He also saw patients at a private wellness clinic in Schaumburg, Illinois. Over the next decade, his philosophy changed, and he became enamored with so-called natural medicine and the use of nutrition and exercise to prevent disease in the first place. In 1997, as the internet was still in its infancy, Mercola launched a website named after himself, Mercola.com. These days, Mercola reports the website receives 10 million page views every month, which shows the importance of getting in early on promising platforms. The website and the companies tied to it were originally based near Chicago, but these days, Mercola's empire is based in Cape Coral, Florida, with a remote office in Manila in the Philippines. Mercola himself moved to Florida. His partner is Erin Elizabeth, whose website Health Not News meshes well with Mercola's pseudoscientific ideas. Mercola publishes new articles daily on his website. He's also listed as the author of 15 books, 3 of which were included on the New York Times bestsellers list. His website features a store on which you can buy a slew of alternative solutions for your body and your home. From every dietary supplement you can think of, to a headband that promises to send your brain to the gym, from groceries and clothing for you to digestive enzymes aimed at your pet. In 2016, the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, in the United States, which is tasked with protecting consumers, filed a complaint against Mercola and his companies in connection with tanning beds that they were selling. Tanning beds are, it turns out, not good for your skin, but Mercola was advertising his as being anti-wrinkles, healthy, and safe. In one video, Mercola claimed the bed would, quote, give your skin a more healthful glow. And if by that he meant the glow of skin cancer, then I guess he was right. Mercola was banned from selling indoor tanning beds and agreed to refund the people who had purchased them. Joe Mercola is the upside-down doctor. Whatever is generally accepted by the medical and scientific communities, he is against and endorses the opposite viewpoint. In his topsy-turvy world, vaccines are dangerous and the diseases they are meant to prevent are mild. Genetically engineered food is harmful. Cell phone radiation and regular sunscreen are giving us cancer, and we should all be wary of pharmaceutical drugs. This basket of beliefs is supported by grand conspiracy theories about world leaders plotting in secret to enslave humanity. And if you worry about your mom or uncle being exposed to this fear-inducing content on Fox News every day, well, ask yourself if they subscribe to Joe Mercola's daily newsletter. Every day, including weekends, Mercola releases an email newsletter. I picked a fairly typical one to go through, the one sent out on February 19th of this year. There's a top story. Vax leads to wheelchair and feeding tube, yet Pfizer rates it a success. Typical, the vaccines are harming us, but Big Pharma doesn't care narrative. Then there's an ad for a sale on Mercola's website. That's right, it's the last day of Mercola's President's Day sale. Get 20% off all orders or 25% off orders of $150 or more, with free shipping on orders over $99. Don't miss out, it's an unprecedented deal. That's the kind of bad pun you get when you don't pay your interns. More on that later. Then there's trending news with two stories. One on the COVID vaccines apparently triggering autoimmune disease, so yet another article along the lines of vaccines are bad. Then, Chinese herb shows promise against tooth decay, which is classic Mercola. Modern solutions, especially pharmaceutical solutions, are bad, but the stuff you find in nature, that's what will keep you healthy. Then there's breaking news, which is somehow separate from trending news, and we have to click on it to learn more. Finally, there's another ad, this one for Mercola's own brand of liposomal hyaluronic acid, which apparently promotes firmer, more youthful skin and joint support, asterisk. The asterisk leads us to the footer of the email, in which a lengthy disclaimer tells us none of this is medical advice. I'll talk more about supplements in the next chapter because this is a huge piece of the Mercola puzzle. Now, let's go over this newsletter in more depth to investigate what Mercola is saying, to see if it's true or false or a gross exaggeration of the truth. The first story about the vaccine leading to a wheelchair and a feeding tube is a story of Maddie de Goray. Her mom allowed her and her two brothers to enroll in Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine trial for 12 to 15-year-olds in 2021. Following the second dose of the vaccine, Maddie had a severe reaction. The article says it left her unable to walk or eat, she's been in constant pain, has vision problems, and a lack of neck control. And apparently, she was dismissed by doctors and told it was all in her head. This is a story that was in the news. It was reported by both NBC and Fox, and we have access to documents the mother submitted to the Food and Drug Administration. But it is impossible to decide exactly what happened. I'm not a doctor, and I haven't seen Maddie. Odds are the same holds true for you. The mother claims her daughter's extreme reaction occurred fewer than 12 hours after receiving the second dose of the vaccine, and that her pleas for help were consistently dismissed. The doctor who reported what had happened to Maddie to the Vaccine Adverse Event Database, VAERS, seems to have chosen to call it a conversion disorder, which according to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia website is a condition in which physical harm is experienced, including paralysis, blindness, and seizures, but there's no disease to the nervous system explaining this. This is often blamed on a person's poorly expressed psychological distress. Again, I don't know what happened there, and the fact that this was apparently dismissed more than once worries me. I can only imagine how horrible it must be to have your own child participate in a clinical trial and leave it in a horrifying state while the people in charge seem unconcerned. When we say that vaccines are safe, it is a useful shorthand. No intervention is ever 100% safe. There are people who die from drinking too much water, yet I think it's fair to say that drinking water is safe. There are very rare cases where people indeed appear to have been harmed by a vaccine. My heart goes out to them. But it's important to remember that the diseases these vaccines prevent are not risk-free. The reason these vaccines exist is because the disease kills and maims people. And it's important to realize why the case of Maddie de Garay is featured as a top story in Mercola's newsletter. It's to make the vaccine appear way more dangerous than it is. Notice that the story isn't about the literal billions of people who received the vaccine and were fine, or suffered the kinds of mild symptoms that we put up with, like soreness in the arm and a bit of fatigue. No, the focus is on one of the rare people who may have been injured by the vaccine. This, of course, is a classic technique of the anti-vaccine movement. Only focus on the stories told by people claiming to be injured by vaccines to make getting a vaccine the equivalent of playing Russian roulette. If we did the same thing with food, we would be scared to open our mouths. This person choked on her dinner and died, yet the Food and Drug Administration ignores this common choking hazard. Risk has to be put in context for people to make wise decisions. It should not be exaggerated. The next story was about the COVID vaccines again and how they trigger autoimmune disease. And autoimmune disease is when your own body starts attacking itself, perceiving a part of you as foreign. Incidentally, this article on Mercola's website is credited to The Vaccine Reaction, a publication of the National Vaccine Information Center, which is a well-known anti-vaccine advocacy group in the US. The group has been funded in part by Joe Mercola, a point I will come back to later. This article is a summary of two papers, one from Mexico and the other from Turkey, in which scientists report a total of 5 healthcare workers who developed thyroid problems shortly after getting the COVID vaccine. This can happen, but it is rare. So rare that the Mexican study was published in a section of the journal literally called Case Studies and Patients with Remarkable Features or Rare Disorders. The Mexican doctors write that, quote, the vaccine has been shown to be safe, and that reactions to the lipid molecules it contains, quote, have been reported but are relatively rare. The Turkish doctors note, quote, the self-limiting nature of most cases, and they conclude with the following. COVID-19 has been leading to millions of disabilities and deaths worldwide, and the risks of COVID-19 outweigh the minor risks of the vaccine. Therefore, vaccination should continue unabated. You won't get those quotes on Mercola's website, just fear-mongering. It's also important to point out the psychology at play here. When you hear about these very rare injuries that happened after someone sought out the vaccine, you may think to yourself, I'm not going to choose to put myself in harm's way. I'll instead see what happens with the virus. I might be exposed to it, I might not. Maybe God or the universe or whatever will protect me. Whatever happens, it's out of my hands. But if I get the vaccine, it's a choice that I make to expose myself to a risk. We prefer to choose to do nothing, whatever the consequences may be, than to choose to do something that carries a risk. This is really irrational when choosing to do nothing means exposing yourself in the middle of a pandemic to a highly communicable virus that attacks multiple organ systems. Then we get to the Chinese herb story in Mercola's newsletter. The herb is called Gala chinensis, and according to Mercola, it has the potential to prevent cavities, and it has antiviral and anti-cancer properties. It helps protect your liver, it helps stop diarrhea, and it's an antioxidant. That's incredible! However, this anti-cavity effect is assumed based on some laboratory research not done in humans. So why even write about it? Because it's another opportunity for Mercola to demonize fluoride. Fluoride, a naturally occurring molecule, apparently has no benefit in humans. It's an endocrine disruptor, it lowers the IQ of your children, and it's basically the devil incarnate. None of this is true, but these are the talking points of the anti-fluoride movement, which Mercola loves to repeat. Remember, both fluoride and that Chinese herb are natural, but the fact that they're natural tells us nothing about their benefits or their safety. We need to test both natural and synthetic molecules to know how effective and how safe they are for us to use. We now arrive at the breaking news segment of the newsletter, and this one is an odd duck because it cites sources that Mercola doesn't usually gravitate toward. There's a pro-GMO article in there about a new GMO tomato full of anthocyanins. There's a bit about Elon Musk's Neuralink brain implant. There's even an article about the COVID vaccine that comes from I effing love science. Is there a pro-science spy working at Mercola HQ? Are they surreptitiously posting pro-genetic engineering articles on that blog as a silent form of protest? I'm genuinely shocked. Finally, we get to what is essentially an ad for a supplement Mercola sells. This one is liposomal hyaluronic acid, which we are told is great for skin support, bone and joint comfort, and has enhanced bioavailability. I'm not sure how you test for bone and joint comfort, though. Do you call up your funny bone and ask if it's feeling relaxed? But it doesn't matter because Mercola is banking on his appeal that this is both natural and cutting edge, and it'll make you look younger, so buy it now because it's on sale. You may have noticed that I have aged about 5 years while I took you through this whole newsletter. This is known as Brandolini's Law, named after programmer Alberto Brandolini. The amount of energy necessary to refute BS is an order of magnitude bigger than is required to produce it. I had to look up these cases and papers and ingredients. I had to provide sources. I had to explain the bad psychology that makes people fall for these things in the first place. Meanwhile, for people like Mercola, churning out this stuff is fast because they don't need to pay attention to the truth. It's not about facts. It's about feels. Mercola wants you afraid so he can sell you a solution. Mercola's solution? Pills. Lots and lots of pills. If you're not familiar with the wellness industry and want to get a glimpse at how lucrative it is, just go to Mercola.com, click on the store link, and look under supplements. We've got the bestsellers, liposomal vitamin C, vitamins D3 and K2, complete probiotics, magnesium L-threonate, and quercetin and pterostilbene advanced. I'm still unsure if that last one is just ground up pterodactyl. Then you can filter all of Mercola's supplements by goal: beauty and skin health, bone and joint health, brain and memory health, cellular and mitochondrial health, detox health, digestive health, energy production, heart health, immune support, metabolic health, mood and stress management, sexual wellness, sleep health, and vision health. I know you're curious about sexual wellness, so I checked. There are no fewer than 17 distinct products listed in that category. If you bought the smallest formats of all 17, you would give Mercola a little over $500. That's a lot of money to be pleasing your partner. Dinner for two at a good restaurant and a bouquet of roses? A lot cheaper. But we're not done. You can also shop by supplement name. You can access vitamins separately. And there are collections like antioxidants, probiotics, and women's health. It never ceases to be funny to me that people like Mercola will denounce pharmaceuticals for being harmful pills whose only purpose is to make big pharma money, while they sell you different pills that make them a lot of money. But because they are vitamins and probiotics and so-called natural stuff, it's seen as good and wholesome. I hope you realize that vitamin C tablets don't grow on trees. They are made in a lab. They are synthetic. The fact that they are the result of human processes is not the problem. The hypocrisy is the problem. Let's talk about dietary supplements, as they are called in the US. They are not regulated by the US government at all, except for manufacturing practices. Now, libertarians will rejoice at that and see this as true freedom. But what this means is that anyone can sell you something that you put in your body, and there is no oversight when it comes to effectiveness or safety. It is the Far West and anything goes. This is because of lobby pressures in the 1990s, which led to DSHEA, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994. It exempted these supplements from government oversight. One of the people responsible for this is none other than Mel Gibson, who starred in an ad trying to convince people that the government's armed forces were coming for their vitamin C tablets. I'm not even joking.
Freeze! Drug enforcement! Ah! Oh! Oh! Guys, hey, it's only vitamins. It's only vitamins. Vitamin C, you know, like in oranges.
Since DSHEA was signed into law by Bill Clinton, the market has been flooded by these supplements. They often rely on laboratory or animal studies, sometimes on tiny studies in humans, to claim that they offer health benefits. They use vague language like helps maintain good circulation or aids in the formation of protective liposomes in the stomach to reduce the potential for gastrointestinal distress. Anyone can make these claims because they are very vague and don't mean anything, unlike the claim that a pill will lower your blood pressure or reduce your blood cholesterol levels. And these supplements can be contaminated or adulterated. Contamination means that something else ends up in the bottle that shouldn't be there. Adulteration means that a substitution was deliberately done, often because the herb being sold is too expensive for the manufacturer, so they instead get something that looks like it but that costs them pennies. Or there's a bit of the real stuff in there, but a ton of something cheaper that costs less. To give you a shocking example, here's a study done in 2001 and 2002 in which anti-doping researchers tested 634 nutritional supplements sold in 13 different countries to see what was inside. A little over 1 in 7 of these supplements was contaminated with steroids. That's a problem, especially if you're an athlete who wants to gain an edge without doping yourself. I'm not saying that Joe Mercola supplements are contaminated or adulterated. I'm saying that it is a problem with the industry as a whole. What really helps is when supplement makers hire a certified third-party laboratory to independently test the supplement and make sure that the label is honest. Recognizable third-party testers include NSF, Informed Choice, and USP. On the Mercola Market website, where Mercola supplements are sold, there is no mention of third-party laboratories. Instead, we read about Mercola's premium standards, and that its products undergo testing at multiple stages. But all of this testing seems to be done internally. In an article for The Ringer, former Mercola.com marketing associate Adam Marcus said of Mercola's storefront, quote, "With the amount of violations they've been through, I'm surprised they haven't been shut down." He goes on to describe Mercola's philosophy. Mercola would look at other products on the market and then see which non-active filler ingredients were in them. Then, according to Marcus, he would claim that that filler was harmful, and he would sell a version of the product without the filler. Quote, "But he wouldn't remember which ones he'd bad-mouth," Marcus concluded. So he would then release products with those fillers. You thus have to ask yourself if you trust Dr. Mercola and his standards. And the thing is, you may think Dr. Mercola is behind everything you can find on his website, but actually that is not true. Not by a long shot. Imagine you're undergoing a colonoscopy, and the person who is guiding the probe up there casually mentions that they are not a gastroenterologist. In fact, they never went to med school. They're an airplane pilot, and they had a spare day to learn a new skill. Congrats! Your large intestine is their new flight simulator. Qualifications are important. If you're getting divorced, you seek out a qualified lawyer, not a plumber. Your car needs a mechanic, your accounts need an accountant, and your body needs someone who knows a thing or two about biology. You may have noticed that the articles on Joe Mercola's website are not directly credited to Joe Mercola. They typically say, "Analysis by Dr. Joseph Mercola." That's a strange way of crediting someone. If you picked up Mark Twain's autobiography and the cover said "Biographical Facts by Mark Twain," you might suspect that ghosts are real and one of them picked up a pen. When you scroll down to the disclaimer at the bottom of the Mercola website, you see this head-scratching statement. The entire contents of this website are based upon the opinions of Dr. Mercola, unless otherwise noted. Individual articles are based upon the opinions of the respective author, who retains copyright as marked. Wait, who is writing these articles? Because based on his newsletter, Mercola churns out 3 to 4 pieces a day. If he's not writing them, who is? Only one place was going to give me the answer to this question. A social media platform with a recognizable blue logo, a sort of book of faces where people share photos and videos of themselves excelling at what they do. That's right. LinkedIn. I looked for anyone who had listed Mercola.com as a current or previous place of employment, and I found copywriters, content specialists, content coordinators, editors, and content writers. I found a content writer who had spent 4 years working for Mercola and who described her job as ghost wrote research-based articles. Her profile is no longer available because I reached out to her to see if we could talk, and she declined before turning her LinkedIn profile inactive. So the ghostwriter ghosted me. But there's another former employee who spent 3 months as a health writer for Mercola, and her profile is still active, and you can see what she wrote. Ghostwriter of health articles for Mercola Inner Circle, a paid subscription arm of Mercola.com. I learned a lot as a writer, and a lot about health, but the bottom line lesson for me was that writing my own articles in my own style, not trying to sound like someone else, is what I most enjoy. I reached out to many former employees, and while most of them ignored me, one of them did agree to answer my questions anonymously, and they confirmed what I had suspected regarding how the Mercola sausage gets made. Here's what this person would do. They would look at different health sites to see what was trending. They would send little blurbs about these topics to some of Mercola's writers, and one of these writers would produce an article. Now, this person I was in touch with was not a scientist or a medical doctor. They weren't a nurse or a dietitian. They had a degree in communications. And the one writer they personally knew also did not have a health science background. And that writer, who had never studied health sciences, would do research on the topic and use that to write up an article for Mercola. As for where Mercola himself fits into all of this, according to my source, it's unclear. My source's boss was a manager, and they don't know who that person's boss was, but there was little communication with Mercola himself, unless he was in the office, which was, they tell me, quote, for very short amounts of time. I asked my source if they had access to scientific journals, which are typically behind a paywall, to access scientific information to inform the work they and the writers did. They did not remember having access to those. You could argue that this was in the past, that Mercola now only hires people with the right qualifications to be writing articles about vaccines, dietary supplements, and all manner of borderline medical information. You could argue that, but you would be wrong. Earlier this year, I looked up everyone listed on Mercola's editorial team according to his website. I tried to track down as many of them on LinkedIn to see what kinds of qualifications they had. Was Mercola hiring the right people, or was he recruiting gastroenterologists from the United Airlines flight deck? At the top of the hierarchy is CEO Steve Rye. Then we have chief editor Janet Selvig, whose profile shows that she studied at Illinois Triton College in the mid-'80s and has been employed by Mercola for almost 39 years. What was the hiring process like? Presumably very easy, because Janet Selvig is Joe Mercola's sister. That's right. Don't let the name fool you. Selvig is her married name. My source revealed to me that Mercola and Selvig were siblings, and this was confirmed when I found the obituary for their mom. Then there's Anne-Marie Alstead, a researcher, writing assistant, and editor on whom I couldn't find anything. There's Anne-Margaret Talon, who has a bachelor's degree in engineering and a certificate in editing. Not exactly qualifications for health news. There's Cindy Olmstead, a content researcher and editor for Mercola for the past 14 years, who describes herself as an award-winning journalist. I kept going down the list, and I found a researcher and writing assistant with a degree in geography and urban planning, a researcher and writing assistant with an undergraduate degree in philosophy, a Canadian writing assistant and editor who studied journalism and worked at comicbookmovie.com, a website content creator with a focus on health topics who earned a degree in literature, and a researcher and writing assistant with 2 bachelor's degrees in communication with a specialty in creative writing in both cases. The joke writes itself. Nobody on Mercola's team that I was able to track down seems to have any education in medicine, nursing, nutrition, or health sciences in general. They are mostly communications and English lit majors and journalists. This is not an accident. It's a requirement. As I was conducting research for this video, I noticed that Mercola Market, the retail store of Mercola's empire, was recruiting an assistant editor. The job description includes, quote, researching and creating short daily blogs based on trending topics as needed, and even to update existing content to revise outdated information. It would be nice if they had some knowledge on these topics. The requirements? Bachelor's degree in English, journalism, communications, or a related field preferred. No science degree required. To everyone who gets their information about supplements, about what to eat and what to drink, about medical interventions and vaccines from Mercola's website, are you happy with this? Are you happy that it's not an osteopathic physician writing most of these articles, but unqualified communications and English lit majors? And no disrespect to these people who were just looking for a job, and this is what they found. I don't blame them. But the bottom line is that the work of searching the scientific literature and interpreting it for you, work that I myself do, is being done on Mercola's website by people who are hardly qualified to do it. And understanding the source of the information you are consuming is one of the most important parts of media literacy. Who is saying this thing? Are they credible? How do they know this? If it's just recycled trending topics from random wellness blogs stamped with Mercola's imprimatur, is that good enough for you? Maybe it is. Maybe you think that Joe Mercola is being unfairly maligned by people like me, that this kind of scrutiny is harmful somehow, that he is the real victim here. If that's what you believe, then congratulations. This victim narrative, it's straight out of Mercola's playbook, and it's a narrative that has made a lot of people very rich these past few years. In November 2021, a group of plaintiffs, including Joe Mercola, filed a complaint with the United States District Court. The complaint revolved around a book Mercola co-wrote called The Truth About COVID-19. And the defendant in this complaint was none other than U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren. The wellness industry loves to paint itself as a collection of little mom-and-pop stores struggling to eke out a living in the shadow of big pharma. But Mercola is a big player, and he has sued the Washington Post, the BBC, the Associated Press, Reuters, the New York Times, Google, and Senator Elizabeth Warren. What was Mercola's beef with Senator Warren? His book, The Truth About COVID-19, which I've criticized before for being a Reader's Digest version of the entire misinformation cyclone that was unleashed at the beginning of the pandemic, was denounced by Senator Warren. She wrote a letter to Amazon, which was selling the book and flagging it as a bestseller. So she asked that Amazon review its algorithms and produce a plan to ensure they no longer promoted COVID-19 misinformation. Mercola argued that this was a violation of the First Amendment, guaranteeing that government does not interfere with the free speech of its citizens, and that Warren was intimidating and threatening Amazon to stop selling the book. 2 years later, the case had moved up to the Court of Appeals, where Judge Paul J. Watford issued his opinion. He made the point that there is a difference between a government official trying to persuade, which is allowable, and that same official trying to coerce, which is not, and that Senator Warren had not crossed a line from persuasion into coercion. As a senator, she has no unilateral power to penalize Amazon for its promotion of the book, and there was no evidence that Amazon changed its algorithms after receiving her letter. And no evidence was filed indicating that Senator Warren even followed up on her letter in any way. But buried in this lengthy opinion from the judge is a very telling gem that illustrates the underlying playbook. At some point during these legal proceedings, Mercola and his fellow plaintiffs argued that Amazon could have read Warren's letter and reasonably thought that it implied she could refer Amazon for criminal prosecution as an accomplice to homicide. That's right. The argument was that this massive company would rationally think that Senator Elizabeth Warren would unleash a criminal prosecution for being an accomplice to the killing of people because the book contained untrue claims about the COVID-19 pandemic. I haven't seen this much overripe drama since the last time I glanced at a soap opera. Judges, of course, can't exactly go about comparing plaintiffs to actors on General Hospital, and so both the District Court and the Court of Appeals said that this interpretation of Senator Warren's letter, quote, requires a vivid imagination. In between each one of these words, I imagine an animated gif of Captain Picard doing the double facepalm. But this is the victim complex of Joe Mercola and other purveyors of health-related falsehoods. This is a key feature of grand conspiracy theories. The people promoting them see themselves as both victims of unassailable giants and invincible heroes who can topple the established order. They are simultaneously powerless and omnipotent. It's a compelling story for recruitment because it gives people someone to blame for everything bad in their lives. They can bond over their resentments, and then they can unite with the promise that they are strong enough to expose the behind-the-scenes manipulators, bring them to justice, and usher in a new world order. Whenever Mercola or his ghostwriters publish a piece about politics, and for a guy selling you supplements, he has a lot to say about American politics, it is full of examples of this victim mentality. Here they are echoing Fox News talking points that vaccine mandates during the pandemic are the sign of an upcoming communist-style social credit system. Here it's a claim that the people fighting back against blatant lies are part of a shadowy disinformation industrial complex that is well-funded for the purpose of pushing propaganda on the American people. And here, the COVID unvaccinated no promises, may soon be shipped to quarantine camps with a subheading referring to them as prison camps. The feeling Mercola wants to invoke is that you are a victim of dark forces. In 2021, when faced with, quote, business and personal threats, Joe Mercola turned this victim mentality into gold by creating Dr. Mercola's censored library. What this is both simple and brilliant. Mercola publishes a bunch of new articles on a given day. They are available for free on his main website for 48 hours, but as soon as they're published, the countdown begins. No, seriously, there's an actual countdown on his website to create a sense of urgency. When the countdown ends, these articles are removed from the main website, but they remain available on a paywalled blog, which he refers to as his free speech Substack site. Substack is a way for writers to receive payments from subscribers for the articles they publish. And it has also had a bit of a Nazi problem recently. For $5 a month or $50 annually, you can access all of Mercola's articles in his own version of the Disney Vault. His censored library came to an end in March of this year after he was able to profit from it for 3 years. This is how peddlers of misinformation turn their own violations of the terms of services of the privately owned platforms they use into a revenue stream. When conspiracy king Alex Jones had his YouTube channel deleted by the company, he started posting his videos on ban.video, referring to his show as the most censored news broadcast in the world. It was a badge of honor, a sign that you had found what the establishment was trying to hide. It was dangerous and cool, like smoking in the 1950s. Libertarian political commentator Dave Rubin capitalized on the fetishization of cancel culture by writing a book called Don't Burn This Book. Pretty soon, these would-be victims found each other and started organizing around the theme of censorship. You can register for a free 4-day online presentation called the Health Freedom Summit, which features presenters with, let's say, checkered histories like Joe Mercola, Robert Malone, Del Bigtree, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and Peter McCullough. The people who put the website together really want you to identify with these poor victims of censorship. Overcome censorship, effectively protect your rights, medical apartheid. Thousands of doctors were censored, with many having lost their medical licenses. These presentations are free because that's how they onboard you. Once you're ready to call these people brave heroes, there are plenty of ways in which you can give them money. Beyond the internet, massive events predicated upon this theme of being canceled take place, with the same gaggle of influencers being invited to take the stage. There's Replatform for the Deplatformed, a Las Vegas extravaganza about the freedom economy, featuring RFK Jr. and Steve Kirsch, as well as the premiere of Plandemic the Musical. General admission, $299. VIP admission, $699. There's the infamous Autism One conference, which acts as propaganda for the debunked vaccine autism connection that reminds you that you can get leading-edge content from experts uncensored. There's the Reawaken America tour, pitting the Great Reset plan against the Holy Bible, and featuring speakers like Mickey Willis and Judy Mikovits of Plandemic, alternative health figures who routinely peddle pseudoscience like Peter McCullough, Mike Adams, Ty Bollinger, Dr. Christian Northrup, and Andrew Wakefield, also General Michael Flynn and Eric Trump. Rising up in the face of censorship, whether real or imagined, is now a rallying cry. Censored is a sound that comes out of the mouth of a bald eagle post-pandemic. It draws in freedom-obsessed Americans who distrust experts, and thanks to the internet, it crosses borders and bleeds into the cultural narrative worldwide. And the people at the top are dying to get canceled so they can profit from it. As science communicator Abby Richards put it in a video, the playbook consists of 3 parts. First, scare your audience. Then, make them believe that only you can be trusted. And the best part, number 3, profit. Her video was about Russell Brand, the comedian who veered from crunchy guru to misinformation superspreader, but it also applies to Joe Mercola. Make them afraid, get them to trust you, take their money. Welcome to what some have called the grifter economy. You may have noticed during the pandemic sort of second wind for the anti-vaccine movement. No longer obsessed solely with the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine or the HPV vaccine and what it might do to teenage girls' sex lives, anti-vaxxers became very anxious about the upcoming COVID vaccines, some of which were relying on so-called new technologies. Soon, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube were full of anti-vaccine slogans, memes, and videos designed to make people doubt vaccine safety. Turns out, you don't need a lot of people to manufacture doubt. When the Center for Countering Digital Hate took a sample of the anti-vaccine content that was being shared on Facebook and Twitter for 6 weeks in early 2021, they could trace it all back to 12 people. Well, technically 13, but 2 of them are a couple working together. And they call them the Disinformation Dozen, or the Disinformation Baker's Dozen, if you want to be more accurate. Top of the list was Joe Mercola himself, who at the time had a combined personal social media following of 3.6 million people. Jonathan here in the editing room. Just in case someone wants to push back against this, yes, Facebook's parent company Meta did publish a blog post in which it disagreed with the findings presented in the Disinformation Dozen report. It's important to point out that making the problem of anti-vaccine misinformation on their platforms seem much more intractable than it is to their benefit, and there's a long history of Facebook failing to act against dangerous falsehoods spread on its site. Neither Facebook nor the Center for Countering Digital Hate have released their raw data, as far as I know, so it's a case of he said, she said. Even if Mercola is not responsible for as much misinformation as he's being accused of in this report, he is responsible for a lot. Back to the video. Just like the sale of dietary supplements is not typically done by caring individuals who are struggling to make a living in the shadow of the pharmaceutical industry, the spread of disinformation online is not haphazard or weak. It comes from a well-financed infrastructure, relatively small at the top, but one that benefits from the fact that fear spreads like fire, while reasonable and balanced information has a hard time keeping up. Joe Mercola is not struggling financially. In fact, for all of his talk about medical doctors being in the pocket of industry, he may just be one of the wealthiest doctors in the world. He is so rich, in fact, that he has been able to donate a lot of money to organizations which push messages that contradict the scientific consensus on important issues. Where his money goes has been tracked by, among others, the Washington Post, Quackwatch, and the Genetic Literacy Project. You know what conspiracy theorists love to say? Follow the money. Well, let's follow Joe Mercola's money. According to the Washington Post, in the 2010s, Mercola donated more than $2.9 million to the National Vaccine Information Center, previously mentioned. Don't let the boring and pro-science name fool you. That's a common strategy. It's a well-known anti-vaccine advocacy group that has also jumped on the censorship bandwagon. That money Mercola gave them, that's 40% of their funding. The money goes from Mercola.com and into Mercola's nonprofit Natural Health Resources Foundation, before being donated to groups like the Organic Consumers Association, which has received hundreds of thousands of dollars a year from Mercola. The OCA was founded by Ronnie Cummins, who co-wrote Mercola's book on the COVID-19 pandemic and who died in 2023. The OCA promotes organic food and opposes genetic engineering and the widespread use of pesticides in agriculture, positions that I and many scientists would argue are not exactly science-based, or at the very least are gross exaggerations of reality. Mercola also donated between $75,000 and $240,000 a year to consumers for dental choice throughout the 2010s. Once again, banal name, sounds scientific, but can you bet what their mission statement is? Let me give you a clue. Their website address is toxicteeth.org. They are against the use of mercury in amalgam fillings, and as Dr. Barrett pointed out on Quackwatch, given that they are consumers for dental choice, it's funny that they're trying to restrict choice by banning one type of amalgam fillings. I don't know about you, but I don't have millions of dollars to donate each year to organizations that support my belief system. Most people don't. So, exactly how much money is Joe Mercola making? The Washington Post revealed that he stopped seeing patients in 2009. Very soon thereafter, his businesses were reported to be generating $3 million a month. In 2022, Mercola CEO Steve Rye confirmed to a local Florida paper that Mercola's was, quote, a multi-million-dollar company with over 140 employees covering 3 fulfillment centers and a base of operations in the Philippines. If I ask you what Joe Mercola's net worth is, what would you say? 20 million? 50 million? Well, the Washington Post obtained an affidavit dating back to 2017 in which Joe Mercola answered this very question. At the time, he admitted his net worth had grown, quote, in excess of $100 million. That's why I had to chuckle when I saw that job posting on Mercola Market for a social media intern. Salary? 0. It's an unpaid internship. When you cover grifters, quacks, and wellness influencers, you are constantly asked, do you think they really believe what they're saying? People want to know if the big guy who's spreading all of this misinformation and profiting from it is a true believer, or if he's a charlatan, someone who is consciously lying and manipulating his audience because it fattens his bank account. There is a third option, of course, which is rarely discussed. The influencer might not care if what they say is true or false, because it's convenient. If there was any doubt about Mercola's state of mind before, an article by Rick Polito for Natural Products Insider pretty much gave us the answer. It was published on February 13th, 2024, and reveals a night of the long knives at Mercola HQ. Are you ready for it? Here's the title. Dr. Mercola consulted with psychic before axing top executives. The CEO of Mercola and 2 other brand executives were terminated without warning last week, and video evidence suggests founder Dr. Joseph Mercola consulted with a psychic before making the move. CEO Steve Rye? Gone. Chief Business Officer Ryan Boland? Gone. Chief Editor Janet Selvig, Mercola's own sister? Gone. Et tu, Brute? That, in and of itself, might be juicy corporate gossip, but the really interesting part has to do with the alleged psychic. Polito reports on hours of video he was sent in which Mercola talks to a man who calls himself Kai Clay, who says he is speaking for an entity called Balon. This entity-possessed medium gives Mercola business and spiritual advice, and Mercola would go on to describe a 12-book series that will represent a new beginning for the company.
Now, I've always been passionate about technology and health, so much so that I went to medical school to learn more about how I could stay healthy and help other people stay healthy and not to focus on treating diseases. Interestingly, nearly every one of my classmates was focused on treating disease, and I was the oddball, the odd man out, and I wanted to get people healthy. This is why, from this point forward, my focus with this website will shift towards providing content that empowers you to make informed decisions for fostering not only health, but joy. And that is how to embrace your own power to choose to trust yourself and not health authorities or magical gurus with all the answer. And yes, that most definitely includes me. This perspective helps you become less dependent on government bodies, particularly public health authorities and so-called expert physicians and scientists, as well as the pharmaceutical and food industries. But my new goal is to reach billions, literally billions around the world, with a new paradigm of how to increase joy in their life. I'm in the process of writing 12 books at the same time and have nearly finished the first. And the first one is called The Power of Choice, that we hope to be out sometime in the spring. It's a new beginning.
Mercola's sister, Janet Selvig, is said to have confronted her brother about his bizarre behavior, but the meeting did not go well. And here's what Selvig said, quote, "He thinks the book is going to save the world. He believes that he's a god and he's been reincarnated. And he even referred to himself as the new Jesus." Mercola no longer supports the National Vaccine Information Center, for example. And the worry is that this Kai Clay is using spiritual mumbo-jumbo to gain control of Mercola's company. Bet you didn't see the Jesus twist coming. So what do we do with all of this? Some people have been burned by medicine. They were ignored by their doctor, or their symptoms were trivialized, or they were simply told there was nothing medicine could do for them. Depending on where you live, your healthcare system may not be adequate. Doctors typically don't spend a lot of time with their patients. They may be staring at a computer screen while you describe your problems, and they'll prescribe drugs that are imperfect. They may not work for you. The dosage may need to be adjusted, and they almost always come with side effects. Treating those side effects may require more pills. It makes sense for people to instead turn to health gurus like Joe Mercola. What he's offering sounds like a great deal. All natural solutions to everything that ails you. No side effects, no more rush doctors, no more moody nurses, no more pastel-colored hospital hallways. Just the good stuff made by Mother Nature and sold to you by the avuncular Joe Mercola. And he gives you somebody to blame for all of society's ills. It's the pharmaceutical companies, which are in league with each other, and they make so much money that they control the journalists and the academics and the politicians. They are the army of darkness. But you are now part of a light brigade, and together with Joe Mercola, you will overthrow these demonic conspirators to bring about a new age of health and spiritual enlightenment. That's what Mercola offers. But it's a fantasy. Supplements are just synthetic pills that are poorly regulated, and the benefits of which are either known not to exist or they're still unproven because the studies were done in rats. Mercola's conspiracy theories take real corruption and turn the dial up to Hollywood level of good and evil. And Mercola's articles, they're not even written by him, but by people who lack the expertise to evaluate the scientific literature. Behind his giant smokescreen is a doctor who is making tons and tons and tons of money, and who now believes he's the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. Here's an analogy I've used before to distinguish between real medicine and so-called alternative medicine, which is where Mercola fits in. I call it the two towers analogy. Imagine two towers that visually represent the evidence we have. One tower represents medicine, the other, alternative medicine. The conventional medicine tower doesn't look great or modern. It's got this old foundation, and it's always being repaired and extended with better materials. The foundation is pretty solid, but the rest of the tower needs to be cared for, and whatever's rotting has to be replaced. It's a slow process. Meanwhile, there's the alternative medicine tower. Its foundation is made of cheap imitation material. There's a shell around it, a scaffold, because it's still being built. You can see how high it's going to be when it's finished, but that's just because of the scaffold. And that scaffold is draped in this translucent banner that illustrates what the tower will look like when it's done. They do this for buildings. As they're building them, you can see this illustration of the finished thing draping the infrastructure, like the ghost of a building yet to come. From a distance, both towers appear similar, same height, same look. But when you get closer to the alternative medicine tower, the Mercola tower, you notice that it doesn't really exist yet. Don't worry, the foreman tells you, what we have so far is very promising, and we will keep building it. That slogan never goes away. This tower will always be sold as promising, year after year, convincing many people to invest in it. The solution, if you don't want to be taken for a ride, is to make room in your life for nuance, not black or white, but shades of gray. Yes, accessing healthcare can be unpleasant and costly, but that doesn't mean that the drugs doctors prescribe are killing people left and right, and that the COVID vaccines were a deep state ploy to keep track of your movements. Yes, it seems that many systems we were relying on in our society are slowly caving in, and they are inefficient, and there is some amount of corruption in them. That doesn't mean that every institution is malevolent and secretly plotting to enslave humanity. And yes, there are health solutions to be found in nature. In fact, many pharmaceutical drugs are derived from plants. But they need to be studied. Their active ingredient needs to be isolated, sometimes modified, to make them safer and more tolerable. And that ingredient needs to be consistently dosed so that we know how much we are getting. We want easy answers, and people like Mercola are more than happy to sell them to us, even though they are a fantasy. So if you can't trust Joe Mercola to give you evidence-based answers to your health questions, what do you do? Where do you go? Part of the solution is to allow yourself to consume information that comes from actual experts who understand the limitations of scientific research, who are appropriately skeptical of hype and things that sound too good to be true, and who address these things for an audience of non-experts. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our own office at McGill University, the Office for Science and Society. You can access all the work we do at mcgill.ca/OSS, and we have a weekly newsletter as well, and we don't sell supplements. If you want to know the state of the evidence on a particular health intervention, the Cochrane Collaboration conducts these amazing reviews. They do tend to be a bit weak on the topic of alternative medicine by saying that the quality of the evidence is very low, but more studies are needed when studying what essentially amounts to magic in some cases is probably not warranted. But their stuff tends to be very robust. You can also check out Up to Date, which is the portal that many doctors use to know what is the state of our knowledge on specific medical interventions. They have a patient education portal that is free, and the quality of the information is much better than WebMD. If you want to subscribe to another newsletter that explains why organic food is not pesticide-free or why food sensitivity tests are not particularly scientific, check out Immunologic by Dr. Andrea Love, an actual scientist. If your main issue is pain and you want to know about what works and what doesn't, I can think of no better resource than Pain Science, which is run by a former massage therapist and current skeptic, Paul Ingram. If you prefer podcasts, I've been co-hosting The Body of Evidence with Dr. Christopher Labos for almost a decade, and we take great care to report on what the evidence is and not what we wish it were. There's also Conspirituality, which spotlights the mixture of grand conspiracy theories, wellness, and New Age spirituality that Mercola deals in. And I have 3 really solid books to recommend. Rina Raphael wrote The Gospel of Wellness, which is mainly aimed at women who got caught up in the hype over wellness interventions. The book carefully navigates the real problems that women have to deal with, while also denouncing the interventions that don't work. If you can hunt down a copy of Trick or Treatment by Etsan Ernst and Simon Singh, it is a hidden gem that goes over why acupuncture, chiropractic, herbal remedies, and homeopathy are not what they appear to be. And finally, the book Quack Quack by Dr. Joe Schwartz, director of our office at McGill. When the Washington Post published an article on Joe Mercola, its authors, Nina Satija and Lena Sun, wrote that in 2011, Mercola co-sponsored a 15-second video ad on a Jumbotron in Times Square. The ad, the article continues, featured an image of a woman holding a baby with the message, "Vaccines, know the risks." Maybe it's time we passed the hat around to fund a better Jumbotron ad. Mercola, know the risks.